The silence in the High Council's grand chamber was a physical thing. It pressed in from the ancient stone walls, heavy with the weight of 1,000 years of political maneuvering. The tiered seats, carved from the living rock of the home world, were filled to capacity. Representatives from a dozen systems, adorned in the silks and ceremonial metals of their stations, sat frozen, their multifaceted eyes wide. Every tendril, antenna, and manipulative digit was utterly still. The focus of their collective, horrified attention was the small, human woman standing alone at the epicenter of the vast, circular floor. Ambassador Alara Vance felt the silence like a physical blow. It was far worse than the shouting and posturing that had preceded it. For the last 3 standard weeks, she had endured their condescension, as their barely veiled threats and their smug pronouncements on humanity's irrelevance. She had presented her credentials, her people's desperate need for a formal alliance, and their offer of valuable trade and unique technological insights. And for 3 weeks, the Galactic Concordance had treated her like a petitioner from a barely civilized world, which, by their ancient and exalted standards, Earth was. Then, an hour ago, the tone had shifted from condescension to aggression. Supreme Chancellor Zor, a being of immense age and political cunning, whose bulbous head and numerous eye stalks dominated the central podium, had made their position brutally clear. "Humanity's plea is noted," he had droned, his voice a slithering sound in the chamber's perfect acoustics. "However, your species' inherent volatility, your creative but often destructive nature, makes you a liability. The Concordance has voted. You are to be quarantined. No trade, no contact. Your system will be monitored for the next century to assess your capacity for self-governance without triggering a galactic incident." The other delegates had murmured their agreement, a rustle of smug satisfaction. They had dressed their condemnation in the robes of paternalistic concern. But it was a cage, plain and simple, a cage for all of humanity. Alara had opened her mouth to protest, to remind them of the fragile colony ships already en route, of the peaceful intentions of her people, but Zor had silenced her with a wave of a spindly limb. "The decision is final, Ambassador. Your security detail is to be disarmed and escorted from the chamber. You will be transported to a holding facility until transport can be arranged to return you to your system." That was when the massive oaken doors at the far end of the chamber, doors that hadn't been opened by force in a millennium, had exploded inwards. The sound was a deafening, splintering crash that shattered the chamber's ancient quiet for the first time. Shards of wood and twisted metal rained down onto the polished floor. Through the dust-choked cloud, a figure emerged. It was tall, bipedal, and moved with a ground-eating stride that was utterly at odds with the measured, graceful movements of the assembled aliens. It was Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Thorne, Ilara's cultural liaison, and, as the Concordance had sneeringly termed him, her Deathworlder protector. He was a mountain of a man in simple, functional gray fatigues. On his face was a mask of grim determination, his jaw set like granite. Slung across his back was a weapon the aliens had never seen the likes of, a K-7 close-quarters combat shotgun, its short, brutal barrel and pump-action mechanism a testament to pure, unadulterated stopping power. But it wasn't the weapon that had silenced the chamber. It was the look in his eyes. It was the look of a predator who had just found himself in a cage full of prey. He stopped a few feet behind Alara, his presence a wall of solid, comforting heat at her back. The silence in the chamber was now absolute, a vacuum of sound and movement. A high-ranking military advisor from the Rigelian delegation, a creature covered in chitinous armor, made the fatal mistake. He rose from his seat, pointing a clawed finger at the intruder and shrieking a command into his personal communicator for the Guardian forces. Thorn didn't even look at him. He moved. It was a single, fluid, terrifyingly efficient motion. The shotgun was in his hands, the pump action racked with a sound like a mountain breaking, and he fired once. The boom was apocalyptic in the enclosed space. The target wasn't the advisor. It was a small, decorative urn sitting on a pedestal a full 50 meters away, carved from a crystalline mineral said to be harder than diamond. The blast didn't just shatter the urn, it vaporized it, sending a cloud of glittering dust into the air. The shockwave of the blast rattled the teeth of every being in the first 10 rows. In the ringing aftermath, Thorn spoke for the first time. His voice was a low rumble, devoid of panic, filled with a chilling certainty. "The next round," he said, his gaze sweeping across the assembled delegates, "will not be for a decorative pot." The threat was not just understood, it was felt on a primal level. Every instinct honed over millions of years of evolution on a dozen different worlds screamed one thing: danger, apex predator, supreme chancellor. Zor's eye stalks had retracted so far into his head they were practically invisible. He looked from the shattered remnants of his chamber's doors to the pile of crystalline dust that was once a priceless artifact, and finally to the small, resolute human woman standing calmly in the shadow of the giant. For the first time in his centuries-long life, he felt the cold, clammy grip of genuine fear. This was not a petitioner. This was not a diplomat from a primitive world. This was an envoy, and she had just demonstrated in the most visceral way possible exactly what it meant to come from a world that could produce something like the man standing behind her. The chamber remained frozen, not in smug silence, but in the terrified, breathless quiet of prey that knows it is being watched. The terror in the chamber was a palpable thing, a thick miasma that clung to the silks and ceremonial metals of the assembled delegates. Yet, beneath the fear, the ancient calculating minds of politicians began to work. Supreme Chancellor Zor, his eye stalks slowly re-emerging, tried to reassert control. His voice was a reedy, trembling thing, a stark contrast to its earlier booming confidence. This is an act of war, an unprovoked assault on the grand chamber of the Galactic Concordance. You will be unprovoked." Alara Vance's voice cut through his bluster like a laser scalpel. It was calm, clear, and carried to every corner of the silent chamber. She took a single step forward, away from the protective shadow of Marcus Thorn, but his presence was still an iron cord tied to her soul. "You just voted to quarantine my entire species. You called us volatile, destructive, a liability. You didn't ask about our history. You didn't ask about our culture, our art, our dreams. You judged us based on a profile generated from a few intercepted radio signals and the terrified accounts of a single, damaged probe that entered our solar system a century ago and was accidentally deorbited by a solar flare." She gestured towards Thorn, who hadn't moved a muscle, the shotgun now held loosely but professionally across his chest. You see him, and you see a weapon. You see proof of our violent nature. But you don't see the context. You exist in a galaxy that, by your own records, has been at peace for 3,000 years. You've engineered the predators out of your ecosystems. You've bred the fight-or-flight response out of your own psychology. You live in a carefully constructed, controlled garden. And humans, she continued, her voice gaining a subtle, powerful resonance. We come from a garden that fights back. Our world is a death world, as you call it, not because we are inherently evil, but because it is inherently hostile. We have earthquakes that swallow cities, storms that can fling a cow a mile, oceans that can crush a submarine like an egg, and predators. Oh yes, we have predators. Creatures with claws and fangs and poisons. Who have spent millions of years perfecting the art of killing us. She paused, letting the image sink in. But we didn't hide from it. We didn't engineer it away. We adapted. We learned. We built walls, then cities. We tamed fire, then forged steel. We looked at the things that wanted to eat us, and we learned to hunt them in return. Marcus Thorne is not a weapon. He is the culmination of 50,000 years of surviving an impossible world. His reflexes, his strength, his calm under pressure, those aren't tools of aggression. They are the tools of survival. And his primary function here in this room is not to fight you. It is to protect me. As she spoke, the heavy doors to the side of the chamber burst open. A squad of guardian drones flooded in, sleek. Are chrome-plated automatons with multiple limbs ending in stun projectors and constraint fields. They were the Concordance's peacekeepers, designed to be non-lethal but utterly inescapable. Their optical sensors locked onto Thorne. The reaction was instantaneous. Thorne didn't panic. He didn't even look surprised. He moved, placing himself directly between Ilara and the advancing squad. His posture changed, becoming lower, wider, a coiled spring of potential energy. He didn't raise his weapon, but his left hand drifted towards a small, unassuming cylinder on his belt. The lead Guardian drone announced in a flat, synthesized voice, "By order of the High Council, you will surrender your weapon and submit to detainment. Non-compliance will be met with..." The drone never finished its sentence. Thorne moved. It wasn't the charge of a wild beast. It was a controlled, devastatingly fast series of actions born of a million repetitions on hostile training grounds. In one fluid motion, he unclipped the cylinder, a simple, military-grade flashbang, pulled the pin, and tossed it underhanded towards the feet of the drone squad. He simultaneously spun, wrapped his massive arms around Ilara, and turned his back to the blast, shielding her completely with his own body. The flashbang detonated with a deafening crack and a searing white light, far more intense than anything the chamber's lighting had ever produced. The Guardian's optical sensors, designed for the soft luminescence of council chambers, were instantly overloaded. They stumbled, their movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated. Their synthesized voices emitted confused error codes. Then, before the echoes of the blast had died, Thorne was moving again. He released Ilara, who stood her ground, blinking away the spots from her own eyes, and he advanced on the disoriented drones. He didn't use his shotgun. Instead, he moved among them with a brutal, breathtaking efficiency that was a science unto itself. A hand strike to a sensor cluster here, a leg sweep that toppled a 300-kilo automaton there, a precise, powerful shove that sent one crashing into another. It was over in 10 seconds. The squad of 8 elite Guardian drones was a pile of sparking, twitching wreckage on the polished floor. He hadn't fired a single shot. He turned back to face the council, his chest heaving slightly, his expression unchanged. "Non-lethal deterrence," he said, his voice a low rumble that filled the stunned silence. We invented those too. The silence that returned was different. It was no longer the silence of prey frozen in fear. It was the silence of an entire civilization confronting a reality it had deliberately forgotten. They were not facing a volatile, primitive species. They were facing the inheritors of a world that had never stopped testing them, a world that had forged them into something resilient, adaptable, and utterly formidable. Supreme Chancellor Zor's eye stalks trembled. He looked at the chaos, the shattered main doors, the pile of crystalline dust, the twitching wreckage of his peacekeeping force, and then back at the 2 humans, the woman, standing calmly amidst the storm she had unleashed, the man, a silent, unmoving mountain of protective potential. For the first time, he didn't see a petitioner and her brute. And he saw an ambassador and her equal. He saw a partnership forged in a crucible he could barely comprehend. The galaxy's carefully ordered garden had just been visited by something from the untamed wilds, and everything had changed. The silence in the grand chamber was now a living entity, thick with the wreckage of a shattered paradigm. The pile of deactivated Guardian drones smoldered gently, a testament to the new terrifying variable in the galactic equation. Zor, his political acumen finally overriding his primal fear, saw the writing on the wall, written in the plasma-scorched metal of his own security force. Brute force and political maneuvering were useless here. A new approach was needed. He slowly, deliberately retracted his eye stalks in a gesture of submission and respect, a move so ancient and rarely used that a collective gasp rippled through the assembled delegates. "Ambassador Vance," he said, his voice stripped of all authority, filled now with a profound, cautious respect. We have miscalculated." Alara didn't gloat. She didn't press her advantage. She simply nodded, accepting his words as a simple statement of fact. "Yes, Chancellor, you have," Zor continued, his gaze flicking to the immovable figure of Marcus Thorne. "Your protector has made a compelling, if rather disruptive, argument against our assessment of humanity. We have lived in safety for so long, we forgot what true danger looks like. We mistook your caution for weakness, your desire for peace as an inability to wage war. We see now that it is a choice." He turned to address the entire council. The motion to quarantine the human system is rescinded. Unanimously." No one dared to object. The delegate from Rigel, whose military advisor had triggered the entire incident, was slumped in his seat, his chitinous coloring a pale, sickly gray. Alara stepped forward, her voice now filling the void left by Zor's submission. "We did not come here with weapons drawn, Chancellor. We came with hands extended. My world is not a threat to your peace. But we will not be treated as inferiors. We have faced extinction 1,000 times over, from ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanoes, and from our own worst instincts. Each time, we have learned, adapted, and grown stronger. That is the human story. We are not looking for a fight, but we will never again run from one." She gestured to Thorne, who gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Gunnery Sergeant Thorne is not here as a warning. He is here as proof of what humanity can achieve when we work together, when the strong protect the weak, when courage and intelligence are prized above all else. We have our own internal conflicts, our own flaws. We are not perfect, but we are resilient, we are creative, and we are loyal to those who show us respect. She then did something that broke the tension entirely. She turned to Thorne and gave him a small, warm smile. "At ease, Sergeant. I think we're safe for the moment." A flicker of something, was it amusement, crosses Thorne's granite features. He slowly, deliberately unslung the shotgun and propped it against a nearby undamaged pillar, within easy reach, but no longer in his hands. It was a powerful gesture of trust, a calculated risk that spoke volumes. And the effect on the chamber was immediate. A wave of relieved sighs seemed to sweep through the tiered seats. The delegates began to move again, their postures relaxing, their whispered conversations starting up, but this time they were filled with awe and a dawning, genuine curiosity. Zor seized the moment. "Ambassador Vance, the Concordance would be honored to offer you and your protector full diplomatic credentials. We have much to learn from each other. Perhaps you could begin by telling us more about this world of yours. A place that can produce a man like that." He gestured towards Thorn. "And a diplomat like you must have a story worth hearing." The formal alliance that Ilara had come to secure was not just offered. It was now sought after. Over the following weeks, the atmosphere shifted from hostility to a fervent and almost childlike curiosity. Delegates who had once sneered at her now clamored for meetings. Scientists were fascinated by human physiology, by the fight-or-flight response they had long ago bred out of themselves. Historians were aghast and captivated by tales of world wars fought and survived, of pandemics conquered, of environments ravaged and then healed. They listened, wide-eyed, as Ilara spoke of human art, music, and literature, much of it born from struggle and loss, but filled with a defiant hope that was utterly alien to their placid existence. Thorn, for his part, became an unwilling but effective cultural ambassador of a different kind. He was a constant, silent presence at Ilara's side. Young military attachés from various worlds would gather at a respectful distance, watching his posture, his gait, and his seemingly effortless awareness of every exit and potential threat in a room. He would occasionally, in his gruff, economical way, answer their questions. "How do you stay so calm?" one young Rigelian asked him once. Thorn had looked at the alien for a long moment. "Because if I panic, she dies," he'd said simply, jerking his head towards Ilara. "You focus on what you have to do. The rest is just noise." The young Rigelian had repeated that phrase to himself for days, a new mantra from a Deathworlder philosopher. One evening, standing on a balcony overlooking the breathtaking bioluminescent skyline of the Concordance's capital city, Ilara turned to Thorn. The soft light played on his features, softening them for once. "You know, Marcus," she said quietly, "back in the chamber, when you broke down the door, for a second, even I was terrified of you." He didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Good," he rumbled. "Means it worked." She smiled. It did. But it wasn't just the shotgun and the flashbang. It was you, what you are, what we all are, deep down. You reminded them that there's a difference between being peaceful and being helpless, and that they'd confused the two for so long, they'd forgotten. He was silent for a long moment, processing her words. Finally, he gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "The galaxy just got a little smaller," he said. "No," Ilara corrected gently, her gaze also fixed on the alien sky. "It just got a little more honest, and a little more human." The envoy had arrived with a Deathworlder protector, and the chamber had fallen silent. But in that silence, a new voice had been found, and it was the voice of humanity, and it resonated not with the threat of force, but with the quiet, unshakable confidence of a species that had looked into the abyss and, instead of blinking, had built a bridge. The galaxy would never be the same.